Welcome to the African Youth Empowerment Series, where we speak on the role of the youth in the development of Africa. Today we are here with political analyst and panelist for our upcoming forum, Mr. K.F. Malindi. How are you, sir?
Fine, thanks. Yourself?
I'm great. Mr. Malindi, you are one of the most vocal Zimbabwean youth when it comes to politics. What drives and motivates you?
Like I said, thank you for having me, and I think this is a beautiful platform that you guys have opened up, and thank you for making me a panelist as well. I think my passion lies less in just politics, but in the overall development of Africa and of Africans as a generation. It also stems from my family and my parentage. My father was country diplomat in East Berlin in the late 80s, early 90s. And then we moved on to New York, where he was an attaché to the Security Council. Having been exposed to multiple countries, I've also studied in India, worked in Japan. Over the past 10, 15, let's say 2 decades, Zimbabwe has been at a stage where internationally we've been looked down upon. And Africa as a whole is seen as that dark continent. And I think my biggest passion is in trying to promote the image of Africans, trying to promote the development of Africans. And it can only happen through us as Africans, especially the African youth.
We see you've really traveled across the world and really engaged with the different perspectives and opinions and views that people have of this continent. What work have you done in the political space, and are you currently doing, especially with regards to African politics and Zim politics?
In political science, we say politics is ambiguous, meaning that politics affects each and every sector of society, whether it be from the small to medium enterprise holder, the informal traders. So I wouldn't want to say that I've been directly involved in politics, because that would make me a politician, which I'm not. I'm a political analyst, but I think more so the work that I have done. Straight after high school, I worked for Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights for close to 6 years, where I was mentored by Arnold Tsunga, Otto Saki, Tafatso Ralph Mugabe, to mention but a few. I then moved to India, where I finished my degree, and also worked for Breakthrough International, which was Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, obviously was a human rights organization within Zimbabwe. I also worked for Breakthrough International, which is a women and children's human rights organization. I've worked in Tokyo, Japan. I've worked for the Rockefeller Foundation in South Africa, doing research around the areas of HIV and AIDS and mental analysis. And I've also had a bit of fun. I've been able to hold my own show, which was firstly called Zim Conversations and then No Borders on cliffcentral.com. And I'm also obviously a political analyst on ANN7. So I've had a very rounded, I would want to say, career. We always say that in the 21st century, it's not enough to just have a degree. You need to have a broad skill set. And I've been fortunate enough to work with different people in different organizations in different countries. And I hope that I've been able to acquire that skill set that would then go on to assist us, especially myself as an African, to develop the people around me as well as my community and society. But definitely most of the work that I've done has been around human rights.
Yes, I'm seeing, and you've been working for so many different organizations, and they've always been calling you with regards to Zim, and you've really been following the Zim situation.
Definitely.
For I guess the past 5-10 years. How important and significant was the leadership change that happened last year?
I think it goes further than just Zimbabwe. It started with the Arab Spring. So we're looking at Egypt, Tunisia. It's been a continental issue. So I hate speaking of Zimbabwe as an individual country. Africa, one of the biggest issues we have in Africa is a lack of solidarity and, working together. Both politically, socially, economically. But you see, this revolution started, I think, with the Arab Spring. Unfortunately, the Arab Spring turned very violent. But then we move on to Gabon, which is a member of ECOWAS, and they had a very smooth transition where all authorities were in agreement that no, Mr. President, you need to leave. And I think that was one of the first revolutionary changes that occurred within the past 5 years that was completely peaceful in a region that was not ordinarily peaceful. Then coming to Zimbabwe, you see that we're following a trend within Africa and maybe the rest of the third world as well, but way more peaceful. I think the biggest issue was how peaceful it was. It said something about us as Zimbabweans. It sent a message to the international community for them to know the type of people we are as Zimbabweans. More so, I believe that people who were born in the 80s and 90s we lost a whole generation due to Robert Mugabe's regime at that point in time. It was high time, change was needed within the country. Our economy had been, there was such an influx. 1 minute it was here, the next minute it was there. Predominantly, inflation was high. We had a better situation during the government of national unity, but then which was even worse off because people fell to relief and then went back to where they started off on in 2008. So in terms of, just us regaining, especially the youth regaining our generation, regaining some sort of stability. More so, if you look at the fact that we're one of the most educated generations and we've traveled across the world getting multiple degrees only to come back home and not have anything to actually do it, not explore ourselves and our careers. So definitely there's no doubt about it that it was a very significant change of leadership. But I think besides the change of leadership, people woke up. The country woke up and people said, we have the power to bring about this change. And that change was, of course, people speak of how it was the military, but the military could not have done it without the people of Zimbabwe. And I think that's when the people of Zimbabwe realized that, no, we have the power to bring about change in our own country. And hopefully people are going to vote this coming election.
Exactly, getting more people to vote. With regards to the change that happened and the leadership change, what do you think of our current new government in terms of the steps they've taken? Do you believe they're taking the right steps? Do you believe people need to be a bit more patient, or do you believe that there's a lot of areas that they still need to improve on and that the elections will really help us finalize the government that's going to take us through for the next 5 years?
It's a very difficult question to answer, especially because political analysis amongst our generation right now is still very, I don't want to call it fickle. I don't want to offend anyone, but we're still at a very emotional stage in our political understanding. So you'll find a lot of that goes on social media is very emotionally charged. People don't look at politics as an entity, as an industry on its own, and as an area of academic study. I don't want to even say that we have a government. We do not have a government. Emerson Mnangagwa and his faction, or the people who are currently in power, are candidates. Because elections are in July, they got into power in November. That gave them about 7 to 8 months as a government, which I would not even call a government. The ability to change policy, to get into enact new laws, to remove old laws, to change, maybe have constitutional amendments. We still have things like POSA, Public Order and Security Act, that are in power. IPA is still around, which is the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So until we have elections and we have a set candidate who has a good 5-year term to actually enact laws, remove laws, enact laws, have actual policy implementation that he can see going further than just 7 or 8 months, then we can begin to judge. However, we cannot forget, and I always say we cannot run away from the fact that the ZANU-PF regime that is currently in power worked hand in hand with the old regime. So that's something we can never forget. But to add on to that as well, we also need to realize that Robert Mugabe's regime was, an iron fist. So we heard rumors of how people were not able to engage in cabinet. Nothing was actually debated. What was said should go is what went on. So I want to believe that it is actually a new dispensation. And there have been some changes, but changes that are not enough for us to actually discuss from a political level, from an academic level. Socially, people can say a whole lot of things because we have people across the political divide. MDC Alliance supporters would say, no, they're not doing enough. We gave them 100 days. Nothing has changed. The cash crisis is still very much present. People are like, but they stole the money, bring them back. It's all very emotionally charged. Nothing is judicial, nothing is executive, nothing is constitutional. I think for any legitimate political analyst to give you something solid in response to that, that could only happen after elections, where someone has got a 5-year term, and then we discuss what he has done after at least a year, especially in an African setting, especially considering that the country had been going through an economic degradation for over 37 years.
And looking in terms of the next elections, there's a lot of concern and worrying about human rights violations in elections that have been happening in the past that we've seen. Charges of, like you said, this is the same members who were part of the ZANU-PF in the past. Corruption might just continue. There's a lot of worry that we might have just been pulled back into the same, like you said, emotionally charged. Do you believe that the current leadership at least is going to make sure to carry out on their end that we have free and fair elections, and we look forward to a nation where we are transparent, we're going into that transparency?
I don't want to be sucked into the politics of social media, Facebook and Twitter, where people try to prognosticate what's going to happen. Academically, we're not in the business of trying to prophesy or telling people about their futures. But
Sure.
What is currently on the ground, we can only speak of what is on the ground. And what we've heard from the president and his regime is that they're going to allow more than just electoral monitors. They're going to allow the EU, they're going to allow the United Nations, definitely SADC, definitely the AU, and any other organization that applies within the scheduled time and has all their things in order to say, oh, we want to come and we want to both monitor and observe elections within the country. That, I think, is a very, very important step towards a free and fair election. But there's so much more that needs to be done. And like I said, a lot of it is constitutional. So yes, people might say, okay, no, we want this. But things go through the law, and certain things, there just hasn't been enough time for certain issues to be addressed. And I don't think there's enough time. I remember saying on ANN7, I don't think that our country, nor any political party, is ready for elections in 2018. But that's also a very political matter. I'm speaking from terms of actual and objective analysis to say, are we ready? If we look at media reforms, no media reforms have been implemented, and we still have POSA in act. We still have IPA, like I said before. We don't have an equal base of media representation, state-owned local media representation for opposition parties. So, and the time frame is just so short, because now elections have been set to be in July, but still we don't even have a date. It just shows how unprepared the state is. The country is not just the state. So we don't have an actual date. We just know it's in July. This date should have been announced last year, whilst the old regime was there, but even they didn't announce it. So it's a very difficult time legally, and in regards to the state-owned enterprises that run elections. The Zimbabwe electoral committee, I mean, they were recently in Russia. So there's so much that still needs to be done. I do not think that we had time to go to elections and hold an actually free and fair election. But I think the basis is there. I think the will as well is there. If we look at it internationally, there's no such thing as a free and fair election. There's tampering, and we have the Cambridge Analytica scandal that's going on. It's been affecting Kenya, definitely affected Donald Trump. So, I mean, if you look at elections internationally, you're never going to have an election that we call 100% free and fair. But I think the willingness of the state to take certain measures to show that they're trying is the best. In terms of human rights violations, hopefully with these multitude of donors and observers and monitors that are going to be around, it will be reduced. But sometimes we need to remember that political violence is not usually is not always, let me not say usually, it's not always state-sponsored. And it's not always party-sponsored. Nelson Chamisa was being accused of sponsoring violence against Honorable Kupe, and I doubt that he actually sat down and told individuals, but then we have overzealous supporters. And like I said, our politics is still so immature that it's very emotional. So that emotion is what it leads to some of these actions and these occurrences of violence. The worst is that it's state sponsored. But like I said, from a human rights angle, hopefully with these monitors and observers, as well as our local donor organizations and NGOs, they'll be able to monitor the situation. And if it does occur, it's reported, and the police have the capacity and the willingness to actually deal with culprits of violence.
Welcome back to the African Youth Empowerment Series. We're here with political analyst KF Malindi. We wanted to continue where we were left off. We were talking about the role of the youth and in the development of Zimbabwe in terms of elections. That we had seen a lot of the times youth end up getting involved in the wrong side of elections in terms of violence and sponsoring violence on their own end. I wanted to ask, what is the role of the youth in the development of the country in terms of politics, also in terms of voting? What else can the youth do?
So yes, we spoke of politics of the belly, politics of the stomach, that obviously political parties and institutions will manipulate youth who are in positions of need based off of the assets and what they have to offer youth during elections. And that will not change until there's a total revolution of the economic system of both Zimbabwe and Africa, where we no longer have such high unemployment rates, and the youth are coming out of institutions of higher education and going straight into jobs where people can afford a decent living. But more so, that's not happening anytime soon, and to even assume that it will is unfortunate. So which is why I said there needs to be patriotism amongst us as the youth, to realize that we are the only way our countries are going to change. It will take sacrifice, and it will also take collaboration. I think that was the major point that I wanted to emphasize, that unfortunately right now our politics, especially our social media politics, I'm sure you can tell that I'm not a big fan. But there's a lack of collaboration. I do love how we have so many youth who've decided to participate in the 2018 elections. It's amazing. It's the first of its kind in Zimbabwe. But there needs to be more collaboration. Right now it's more about who's right and who's wrong. So it's still about likes and retweets and gaining some social status. There does not seem to be a genuine will to come together and say, guys, it is up to us to fix our country. Yes, it's a statement that we throw around a lot. But when you see them actually engaging together, you find people fighting on Twitter and social media and Facebook. And the minute that we show that there's a lack of unity amongst ourselves as the youth, then we have a problem. Now, I'm not saying let us not engage in debates and constructive criticism. I'm saying it doesn't have to be the level that it is on social media. If I have a difference with you, and we're both political stalwarts, let us meet on the side, let us discuss our differences, and then if we're going to go on a large platform like social media, Twitter or Facebook, we then discuss the main points in a constructive manner, where we do not seem that there just seems to be a lack of collaboration. I can't find a better word. Because as the youth, we all have the same beliefs in terms of we want better economies, we want jobs, we want service provision. I want to be able to take a shower instead of using a bucket. Right? So those are the small things that we all want. So why can we not agree on how we get there? There is a lot of hate speech and a lot of negativity on social media. The minute you find yourselves to be separated or divisive, the veterans of the political playing field will definitely take advantage of that, and you will not be going anywhere. So I believe in collaboration amongst the youth more than anything else.
Collaboration amongst the youth. Do we need to incorporate the idea of diaspora Zimbabweans being able to participate in elections, like voting at embassies? A lot of other countries have already incorporated that idea. And would that be another step towards in the right direction as a nation?
There's no doubt about it. The definition of a citizen is someone who was born in Zimbabwe. No matter where you are in the world, as long as you are born in Zimbabwe, as long as you carry some form of national identification, you are a citizen of the country. And I think it is your right, it is your constitutional right to be able to vote. Unfortunately, the Constitution does not specify where voting should take place. So it's a contentious matter for someone like myself, who's not being social or emotional or taking the sides of any political parties, but just being objective and academic and saying this is something that needs to be provided for in the Constitution itself. And it is not currently provided for. Besides being provided for in the Constitution, how many embassies do we have around the world? And do we have the economic capacity, the financial capacity to make sure that we have people voting around the world? Diplomatic status is partisan, which means that most people who are our diplomatic officials in the diplomatic corps are ZANU-PF appointees. So then it brings about the issue of, are they free and fair elections? So I mean, it's a very difficult it's a very difficult scenario. I think there would need to be, like I said, I do not think that our country was ready for elections in 2018. They are going ahead because of various other issues. And also just to give people a chance to actually set policy. We haven't had set policy for a very long time in Zimbabwe, ever since the GNU. But in terms of structures, especially the diaspora vote, our country is not ready and does not have the financial capacity, but definitely it should be something that should be enacted as soon as possible.
So we spoke a lot of the role of the Zimbabwean youth in terms of getting involved in politics, but we wanted to expand it further from the Zimbabwean youth to an African perspective. What is the role of African youth in terms of politics and, I guess, social development within our countries and linking together towards working towards a united Africa that's more developed, basically?
I think, like I stressed before, politics is ambiguous. So when we speak of politics, we're speaking of the economy, we're speaking of our social political affiliations, we're speaking of race, gender. There's so much that comes with it. And we're going through so many similar issues across the continent. So even though I was looking at things from a Zimbabwean scenario, a lot of them do fit into the African context. One very simple example would be compensate land reform. We do speak of having one of the greatest land reform programs. Okay, no, not the greatest, but we were, let's say, the first to have an extensive land reform program within the country, not necessarily successful. But this is something that's being fought across in Africa. You have the EFF fighting for it down in South Africa. Uhuru Kenyatta is about to face it from the youth. But the question is, do you know of any youth that actually owns a farm? And if they do, are they able to actually farm? Just means of production. We need ownership as African youth. So I think that's one of the first things, looking at an economic level. But we also have, issues with, I need to always stress, I'm a major proponent of women and children's rights. And we have seen the abuse of our women across the continent. And women are the most untapped resource on the continent. A country or a continent that is good to its women, that empowers its women, that educates its women, that has women who have equal rights and equal standing in society, both in the home, in government, in institutions, in organizations. There is no doubt that such a state or continent will flourish. Rapes, abductions, murders, domestic violence, terrorism with Boko Haram. We need, as a continent, to protect our women. I think that's something I stand very firmly for. Sure. But just in general, because this is a very lengthy question, you'd have to spend the whole day here. But just in general, I think one of the biggest things that we need to do, and I'll reiterate it again as African youth, is collaboration. We face the same problems, but we don't come together to come up with the solutions to those problems. And that is one of the reasons why I ended up having a show on Cliff Central called No Borders, to say these borders are artificial. Yes, they're there now, but we have so many ways and platforms to engage with each other and share ideas on how to overcome the obstacles that we face as a continent. But we don't. I remember sitting down with friends one was from Burundi, the other from Rwanda, another from Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa. And we asked ourselves, who is the current president of Namibia? Unfortunately, no one in the room could answer that. It was so embarrassing. So we know very little about each other. And in knowing very little about each other, we can then not associate. And then we have issues of xenophobia that are occurring all over the continent. Those are things that we need definitely to eradicate before Africa can move on as a continent. Collaboration amongst the youth, sharing of ideas, and realizing that at the end of the day, Ubuntu, we are one people.
That is so true. I mean, we spend more time knowing about America and Western
Yes.
media than we do about our fellow country, our
But
fellow
I'm-
continentals.
But I should say that we have taken some major steps, and it's come from the most unlikely of industries. Our music on the continent has brought Africans together more than any other industry.
That is true.
Collaboration started with South Africa and Nigeria, have moved on to Angola, to Ghana, Zimbabwe, the likes of Simba Tags, the likes of Amara Brown, Brian Kadengu. We have so many individuals who are crossing the borders, meeting with fellow Africans within the same industry and collaborating. And I think it is a very major and strong step towards, the goal of actual collaboration amongst Africans.
That is so
Kudos must be given to the music industry.
Yes, and music industry is very important in this continent. How can people get in touch with you to discuss more of these political issues and also African issues?
I don't know if people usually want to get in touch with me, or they're more prominent individuals who do Facebook Live videos and so forth and so on. But no, I'm very much available. My Facebook page is pretty much open. I always get messages from people, who want to discuss. I might be late in replying at times, obvious because of a very busy schedule. But I'm open to any form of social media. Twitter, it's at KFJR2. That's at KFJR2. On Facebook, it's K.F.Malindi Jr. Junior with a JR. So that's that's K.F.Malindi Jr. JR.
Okay.
So I'm very open to engagement. I love to, people picking my mind and me picking their minds as well. It's always an exchange of ideas. It's collaboration at the end of the day, and that's what we need to do. And I don't argue on social media, so don't expect me to get into any major debates. I try to avoid those.
Okay. Thank you so much for appearing on this episode, and we'll look forward to having you on the forum on the 12th of May.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm looking forward to engaging with fellow African youths and looking at what is in store for us as Africans within the next 10 years.
And thank you for everyone who paid attention to this. This has been another episode of African Youth Empowerment Series. We hope to see you next time.